Hi, we meet again. Today is a lesson for the Form 5 pupils, and today I'm going to discuss continuous writing, and it is on descriptive composition. For SPM Paper 1, it is called 119/1. So there are two sections. The first one is Section A, Directed Writing, 35 marks, and then Section B, Continuous Writing, 50 marks. Let's look at Section B, the types of topics. First, you have descriptive. The question can be about a person, place, or event. The second one is narrative. It is like a story. And then we have factual. And then we have argumentative, is giving opinion. And the last one is reflective. Let's look at some examples for you to understand the types better. This is the question from SPM. The year is 2019. So let's look at section B, continuous writing. Types. The first question, write a composition of about 350 words on one of the following topics. Number 1, if you had the chance to be someone else, who would you choose to be? Explain what would be good about being that person and what might be difficult. So this is a reflective type of question. Number 2, modern inventions have made our lives much too complicated. Things used to be a lot simpler in the past. How far do you agree? Explain why. So this is more on giving opinion, or it is called argumentative. And next, write a story about two people who had an argument because one of them had lost a mobile phone. End your story with, and they both realized how foolish they had been. So this one is definitely a narrative. And next, number 4, which do you think is more important, money or health? Compare the two and decide if one is more important than the other. Give your reasons. So this is again argumentative. And then next we have number 5, write about the day you first met your best friend. Describe where you were and how you began talking to each other. Explain how your friendship has developed since that time. So this is definitely a descriptive, and also partially it will be some narration or story there. Okay. For descriptive and narrative writing, actually there is sort of a combination. Okay. So example, when you write descriptive or narrative writing, you can write about a person, you can write about a place or event. There are two types of events, happy and sad. So let's look at today an event which is a sad one. We are going to talk about fire. You're going to learn how to write an essay which is based on the topic of fire. Then you can do some adaptation so that you can change your essays later on based on the questions that will come out in the SPM examination. Let's look at some simple vocabulary first, how to describe fire. If it is a small fire, you can say it is kindled, flickering, dancing. For example, like a flame from a candle, smoldering or crackling. And then if you can have large or well or very intense fire, such as a forest fire or a house fire. It could be described as roaring fire, blazing fire, burning out of control, consuming, raging, or destroying. Let's look at the word list for fire. You have word like blaze, flames, inferno, or fire. Then you have verbs such as burnt down, ablaze, ravage, rage, aflame, spread, lit, engulfed, and rekindled. For adjectives, we have red, burning, bright, huge, large, intense, blazing, hot, flaming, roaring, fierce, crackling. Let's look at the word list for smoke. We have word like smoke, and then verb billowed, rose, drifted, filled. Adjectives for smoke, you have black, dark, suffocating, thick, billowing. Let's look at other nouns such as pandemonium, fireman, fire engine, fire brigade, hydrant, ladder, water hose, police, charred remains. And then we have ashes, shops, house, neighbors, evacuees, rescuer, electricity supply, and blackened remains. Blackened remains are the same as charred remains. And we have verbs such as douse, put out, extinguish, trapped, suffocated, ruined, pump water, sprayed water, injured, screamed, shouted, cordoned off, damaged, destroyed, evacuated, rescued, cut off, salvaged, cried, informed, helped. And then we also have feelings such as shocked, surprised, frightened, terrified, sympathetic, amazed, sad, dejected, bitter, dismal, heartbroken, melancholy, mournful, pessimistic, somber, and sorrowful. Now let's look at the vocabulary, and then there are some pictures so that you can understand the words better. First one, you have flames. This is the picture. Amber. Then you have smoke. You have cordon. You have fire brigade. You have ashes, charred, extinguish, gapping, and also envelope or engulf. Next, let's look at some idiomatic expressions such as cried one's eyes out. So he cried his eyes out as the house was burned to the ground. You can say reduced to tears. I was reduced to tears watching the fire. Stop dead in the tracks. It means I stopped dead in my tracks as I heard the sirens from the fire engine. It means that you are not moving because you were shocked or surprised. And then we have rooted to the ground, which means the same. I stood rooted to the ground, or I stood rooted to the spot watching the fire. And lastly, we have my heart sank. So you can say my heart sank seeing the fire. Heart sank means you were sort of shocked and you were sad. Now let's look at some sample sentences for the introduction paragraph or how the fire started. You can write, a house in my neighborhood had caught fire and people from the neighborhood were rushing towards the house. They were pouring buckets of water to extinguish the fire. A few people were trying to control the fire by throwing sand on it. Many were at a loss how to help the victims. Example number 2, I rushed out and found that our neighbor's house had caught fire. The flames were rising high up towards the sky. Everybody feared that a big fire would spread to the adjacent houses. We were anxious to bring the fire under control. The wind fanned the flames. People tried to put out the fire with buckets full of water and bags of sand. All of a sudden, I was awakened by noise of footsteps outside. It appeared as if people were running in the street. I got up and peeped down from the window. I came to know that the house of my friend was ablaze. I at once hurried to the spot. The house was completely enveloped in flames. The flames leaped to the sky, giving out clouds of smoke. Many were busy bringing buckets of water, while others poured it on the fire. I too joined them as we tried our best to put out the fire, but all our efforts were in vain. Here are more examples. You have the next one is, I heard shouts of fire, fire from the window in the room. I woke up at once and looked out into the street. I saw a house on fire. I immediately ran downstairs and went out with my parents. Many people had gathered there. Some were running with buckets full of water and bags full of sand. What a terrible scene I saw that day. Shouts were heard from inside the house. Huge, intense flames were rising high in the midnight sky. Another example, it was twilight time. I was watching television in my house when I heard an explosion. More followed. So I went outside to see what the matter was. A column of dark billowing smoke told me the story. There was a fire raging a short distance away. The next one, there was a huge crowd gathered at one of the houses further up the street. The house was ablaze, and thick clouds of smoke were floating up into the sky. I went back into the house and made an urgent call to the fire department. Then I ran out again towards the house on fire. There are more sentences here or paragraphs. The column of black smoke was both magnificent and ominous. Then, as I rounded a bend along the road, I saw the fire. The glow of 50-foot flames shooting upwards was blinding. I blinked my eyes to let it adjust to the sudden brightness. After a while, I could see that a row of shops was on fire. As I ran towards the kitchen, I saw tall, angry flames of fire and clouds of smoke. Without wasting a moment, I rushed towards it to put out the fire. I saw thick black smoke billowing outward some distance from me. It was twilight time, and the dirty black smoke rising against a bright red western sky presented quite a spectacle. Knowing that a fire was raging and judging by the color and fury of the smoke, I reasoned that it was probably caused by the burning of rubber and diesel oil. Next, we are moving to the progress in the story. You can write, the fire was ravaging. It was a horrible sight. The fire started from the ground floor. Soon it spread to the first floor. The occupants of the house who had been trapped on the second floor were crying for help. Someone in the crowd informed the fire brigade. The flames were rushing towards them. Their lives were in danger. The fire, however, was out of control, so they all rushed out of the house. Soon the whole building with everything in it was burned to ashes. The fire engulfed the whole house, and within a short period of time, all the furniture and the structure of the house were reduced to ashes. All the people's efforts to control the fire were just futile. The police and fire department had already cordoned off the area. I watched from a distance. A crowd had already gathered, and we gaped with amazement at the spectacle presented by the burning shops. We have next. Meanwhile, the fire brigade arrived. People took a sigh of relief because despite their best efforts, they could not extinguish the fire. The staff of the fire brigade fought bravely with the fierce flames. Water pipes were laid to extinguish the fire. A staircase was set, or you can say a ladder, was set to the window of the first floor. A fireman took great risks. He brought out the occupants and came down amidst the flames. By doing so, he himself was injured. The moment he brought down the last of them, he fell unconscious. The fire rose to about 20 meters, and it lit up the whole area even though the sky was already dark. The firemen desperately sprayed streams of water into the fire to control it. Thick smoke billowing from the burning factory was visible about a radius of 5 kilometers. Let's look at more examples. The heat was so intense that the firemen could not even approach the fire, much less try to extinguish it. I could see two firemen crouched behind their fire engine about 50 yards from the burning shops. They were desperately directing their jet of water towards a row of shop houses just next to the fire, trying to keep the fire from spreading by keeping the neighboring houses wet. I suddenly realized that there were so many people besides me. All of them were gaping at the fire. Their faces, lit by the glow of the fire, revealed a variety of emotions. Some were crying, some looked frightened, some indifferent, and a few were actually enjoying the scene. The fire raged unabated for almost an hour. As the fire progressed, whole shop came tumbling down. Gradually, the fire became less intense as the fuel was burnt away. The firemen turned their attention to the burning shops. These are the two last sentences for the progress. The fire rose to about 20 meters, and it lit up the whole area even though the sky was already dark. The firemen desperately sprayed streams of water into the fire to control it. The last example, it was my friend's house. I saw my friend and his parents were safely out of the house, but his young sister was still trapped inside the burning inferno. The neighbors had formed a human chain and were using buckets of water to put out the fire, but it was of no avail. You can write some of these sentences for the ending. However, with a great deal of efforts, the fire could be extinguished, but it caused great damage and destruction to the house. Furniture and valuable belongings worth thousands of ringgit were burnt to ashes. The whole house presented a dismal picture. The kitchen, the dining room, and the drawing room were badly affected. The injured were immediately rushed to the hospital. But thankfully, no life was lost. The victims were rescued with timely help and assistance by the fire brigade, who put their lives at risk saving them. The fire began to die down. It took 2 hours to extinguish it. The building was reduced to ashes. It was a terrible sight. The fire gutted the building, leaving just a charred shell. Our neighbor was in great distress. These are more sample sentences for the ending. Finally, the blaze died down and darkness enveloped us. The house was totally razed. Only red-hot ember remained where they once stood. Without the glow of the fire, darkness reigned. Silently, the onlookers disappeared from the scene. I could just make out the silhouettes of the firemen busy at their tasks. Elsewhere, I could see groups of people hurrying back to their homes. How fortunate they had been. Dear students, we have come to the end of the lesson. Just now you learned how to write essays for continuous writing, and we learned how to write descriptive essays. I hope you have learned and benefited from my lesson. And then do subscribe to my channel. It is called Educator Omni Tube. Don't forget to subscribe. Okay, that's all. Saying goodbye for Madam Gan. Bye bye.